Thank you. All right, so a couple of things before we get started. Headline into USA Today, and probably the only people staying at the hotel are the only ones who saw this. But what does it say? Millennials spurn licenses. So again, things are happening, things are pertinent in the world that we talked about yesterday. Going back to yesterday, it has occurred to me, I've got two children who are 20 and 21, immersed in technology. And I think what's important for us to remember is that things are changing incredibly fast. Technology surrounds us, but the human touch, human nature is to connect with one another. And I think we need to keep that in the foremost of our thought process as we move forward with technology in the future. So what you do with your customers, face-to-face, touch-to-touch, does matter. All right, so Mount Everest. It rises 29,035 feet in elevation. To the Sherpa people who live beneath her shadows, she's known as Sagamartha, Mother Goddess of the world. And for climbers, this represents one of the grandest prizes in mountaineering. But you have to understand that you have only 25% chance of succeeding, getting to the top, and an even greater chance of getting slammed in the process. So when the stakes are this high, as you can imagine, it takes an enormous amount of teamwork. It takes incredible leadership. It takes people working in cooperation, not only for our success, but our very survival. And the same is true with all of you in this room. It takes all of you working together across product lines, leadership, but it doesn't just stop in this room. It trickles, and it must trickle down to all of your employees, everyone throughout the country, company and the country. So when I'm going to say this a couple of times. What stays in this room shouldn't stay in this room, okay? What happens in Madison shouldn't stay in Madison. You need to spread the word. Don't keep the knowledge, the things that you've learned at this meeting, to yourselves. Share it with the people who matter in your organization, the people who are on the front lines, people who have contact with your customers, okay? So that's a charge that I would like to challenge you with as you leave this meeting. So we are going to climb Mount Everest today. I am going to start our climb above 25,000 feet. Now, I have just saved you about 45 days and a lot of sweat and pain here. Scott Fisher, Hugh Bell, Wes Krause, and I were climbing towards the summit. It was our summit bid. And I can remember taking my steps, 1, 2, I would count to 50, 49, 50, and I would pause. I would look out at the horizon, and I could see some of the world's highest peaks far below us. And then when it's really challenging every single step. But then when I thought I couldn't take another step, I would look up at the peak of Everest. And that's when I would remind myself why I was there, why I was putting my body and my mind through this incredible, painful journey. All the while thinking, nothing can stop us. This is our opportunity. This is our chance. It was absolutely clear. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. 1, 2, 49, 50. And at one point, I paused, I looked out, and what I saw was this bank of black clouds. It was moving very rapidly in towards us. This is the one thing that could stop us. It's also the one thing we had absolutely no control over. We had a decision to make. Do we go up? Or do we go down? Do we pursue our goal regardless of the consequences? Or do we play it safe? Now, probably most of you are thinking, well, no brainer to me. But you have to understand, emotionally, it's a very difficult decision to make. We'd been planning this climb for 2.5 years. We just spent 45 days climbing on the mountain. To give all that up and turn around, it was a very difficult decision. But you all know what happens when you are in a situation where that external environment is changing and you just say, well, maybe we should just wait and see what happens. Wait and see what happens? Well, what happens when that external environment changes and you're not prepared for it? All of a sudden it narrows your options, and you have no choices but to deal with the fire that's in front of you. You have to be aware, constantly looking up and assessing and reassessing every step of the way. And when you make a decision that you say, well, let's not decide right now, let's just wait. Haven't you already made a decision? You all know that. No decision is a decision to do things the way you've always been doing them. Well, reality in the mountains is that we couldn't climb higher and sit out a major storm. So what the four of us decided to do is we decided to turn around and go down to our next lowest camp on the mountain. 20 minutes after we made that decision, one of the worst storms in 40 years slammed into the side of Everest. It was all we could do to get back down to our snow cave alive. How many of you have ever spent time in a snow cave? Okay, a few of you. So, if you really want to learn about building partnerships, learn about your customers, I want to challenge you to crawl under your desk at work. And if you can make it realistic if you want. Just go outside and gather up some of the snow, drape a sheet over the desk. But crawl under there. And then I want you to invite 3 of your partners to join you. And imagine that you're stuck underneath that desk, not for 1 hour, not for 2 hours, but for 5 days. How would you handle it? What would you do? How would you make decisions? And I guarantee every single woman in this room would want to know just one thing. How do you go to the bathroom? Well, actually, I'm going to tell you how we do that because it's one of the most challenging things we have to deal with as climbers. My teammates and I were stuck in this small snow cave for 5 days. The winds outside were blowing over the mountain over 100 miles an hour. Boo, sounded like a jet engine overhead. Avalanches would tumble down. We could actually feel the vibration inside. Every 15, 20 minutes, we'd have to dig out our entrance to the snow cave just to have enough air to breathe. So obviously, what worked under sunny conditions would no longer apply to this very small space. We had to come up with a new system. Now, our system was not complex, but it did require an entirely new set of skills. What we decided to do is we decided to turn our backs and give that person privacy. We had one rule only, and that was no laughing, and then applauding was optional. Now, we all agreed to this new system. We all agreed to it. Very simple. However, on that first day, when we crawled back into our snow cave, Scott Fisher said, and by the way, Scott Fisher was a pretty macho guy, 6'2", 190 pounds. He said, I'm not going to poop. Fine. Second day rolled around. He cleared his throat and he said, I'm not going to poop. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if this is just a guy thing, but I don't know why he had to announce it to all of us. Third day, we started taking bets. And you'll probably all be relieved to know on that fourth day we had a good applaud. Now, I make light of the situation now, but at the time, it was actually a very dangerous situation. For whatever reason, whether it was Scott's ego, his pride, he could not let go of his need for privacy. He was making himself sick. But you have to understand that his decision was not just a personal decision that affected only him. I am amazed by how we all make decisions. How do you make decisions that affect you and your organization? Your seemingly personal decisions have a trickle-down effect to everybody. You see, when Scott was making himself sick, it affected us because all of a sudden we started planning a high-altitude rescue in a major blizzard. Our teammates from base camp were planning on how they were going to come up to assist with that rescue plan. How do you make decisions? What are they based on? Are they based on a set of your personal values intertwined with the organization's personal values? How do your employees, your direct employees, how are they making their decisions on a daily basis? And who do those decisions in turn affect? So Scott didn't get sick. We didn't have a high-altitude rescue, but the other thing that happened here is that all of a sudden our focus shifted. Instead of shifting to the top of the mountain when the weather cleared, we had shifted to going back down the mountain. It took an enormous amount of energy, mental and emotional energy, to then reshift to our original goal of reaching the summit of Mount Everest. Now, I will get off the subject in just a minute, but I promised somebody that I would do this. It's important to stay hydrated. We're not doing anything in the snow cave. We're just sitting there, we're chit-chatting, we're making decisions. You know, it occurs to me that in this world we live in with this fast pace of change and urgency, that sometimes we just get so caught up in that. Sometimes it's important to sit back and be patient while moving forward. And that's what we do in the snow cave. We're not just sitting there idly. We're planning, we're preparing, we're talking about our process, okay? So anyway, it's important to stay hydrated. We drink between 7 and 9 quarts of water a day. Every time we go to sleep at night, we put 2 one-quart water bottles in our sleeping bag. One is filled with water, the other one is empty. Every time we wake up, it's important to sip out of our full water bottle. By the time morning rolls around, the full one should be empty. That empty one should be filled. It's dark. You learn not to get them mixed up. And pardon me, gentlemen, but for all the women in the room, give me a break. Isn't it true, though, is that when you can master the little things in life, you can master anything. And you're not always going to choose the right water bottle. And I think this is really important, that our lives are so dang stressful that we've got to learn how to break that tension, break the stress. And we do that through humor. And I'm not talking about telling jokes. I'm talking about that quiet humor that is within us. When you are stressed out day after day after day after day, how do you break that tension? It's when you break the tension that you become creative and are able to come up with solutions to your challenges. You've got to learn to laugh at yourself. Our lives are stressful. Our work is stressful. Our work is important. But we have to learn to laugh at ourselves. Okay, so enough of that. I'll put these away unless somebody wants to borrow one. The weather cleared. After 5 days, we headed up the mountain. We headed up to our next camp at 25,500 feet. And just by the way, these snow caves, we don't just arrive here and find these slots in the ground. We have to dig them out. So they're just large enough for people to sleep very uncomfortably in. We spent the next 3 days here. Each day we got dressed to go towards the top. We put on our down climbing suits, which kind of make us look like the Michelin Man. We put on our crampons, which are the spikes that we wear on the bottoms of our boots so that we can stand on the snow and ice without slipping and falling. We grabbed our ice axes, raring to go towards the top. But every time we got out of the snow cave, we looked up higher and realized we were not going anywhere. The winds were still blowing over 100 miles an hour. On that 3rd day, we crawled back into our snow cave and we just sat there in silence. Nobody wanted to be the first to say we just couldn't do it. Nobody wanted to be the first to say we got to go down. How many of you hold on to a project or a way of doing business because that's how you've always done it? because you have so much invested. For us, you see, we either reach the top or we come home ready to explain what went wrong. It's black or white with us. What is it with you? What keeps you working on a project that is no longer pertinent to the future of American family? Because you have so much invested, because that's the way you've always done it. How long could we stay on the mountain without putting our entire team in jeopardy? But still, we weren't ready to call it a game. So we sat there. I looked at Q. He looked like a sitting skeleton. You see what happens at high altitude? Well, first of all, people were not ever meant to live at 25,000 feet, period. So even though we eat about 7,000 to 9,000 calories a day, and we're taking cubes of butter, by the way, and we're licking them like lollipops, we lose about 13% of our body weight. And actually, here's another suggestion for all of you adventure people out there. Weight loss clinic. Everest Weight Loss Clinic. You just have to get there. Anyway, so we're in a constant state of deterioration. We're basically killing ourselves up here. How long can we stay up here? Again, how long do you hold on to a project? Finally, Q said, if I don't go down now, I won't make it down. He had just spoke what I certainly didn't have the courage to speak. We had to go down. We did not reach the top of Mount Everest that year. It takes strength and courage to climb a mountain. It takes strength, courage, and wisdom to turn around. Strength, what I mean by that is the ability to constantly look up, to assess and reassess objectively and honestly. Not putting your own reality or spin on the situation, but what is real? What is really happening out there? Courage. Courage to change when what we do no longer serves our purpose. And wisdom, what that simply is taking the learnings, both from our failures and our successes, taking those learnings and turning that learning into knowledge so that we can move forward with our objectives. And as I said, we did not make it to the top, but you all know what failure. I mean, let's talk just a moment about failure. Failure is important. If you're not failing, you're not innovating, as far as I'm concerned. Failure, it's an opportunity to learn, right? Failure is only temporary. It allows us to reflect and learn from that experience. It's when we give up, that's what makes failure permanent. Because when we give up, we don't learn and we never go back. We failed, but we were not giving up. And I want to share with you just a couple of things that were reinforced from this climb for me personally. First of all, I would love to be able to stand up here and talk to you about teamwork on this expedition, but I can't do that. Well, I can, but I am not proud of myself and how I acted on this climb. You see, 3 months before we left on the mountain, I went through a terrible divorce. And I thought to myself, if I am the first American woman to climb this mountain, I'm going to show the world I am somebody. And I am going to show my ex-husband I am someone. So you all know what I'm talking about. What happens when you put your personal goals ahead of the organizational goals? It doesn't work. It never works. It backfires. Every step of the way, I knew where I was in relationship to every single member of my team on the climb. I didn't care how I get there. I didn't care who I stepped on. I had to be first because I wanted it and I needed it, and that was the way it was going to be. So when I failed on this climb, pretty much I came back the same Stacy Allison I was before. Failure gives us an opportunity, as I said, to reflect, to look at ourselves face to face, okay? What do we want to change? within ourselves, within our organization when we fail. And by the way, you know what the media focuses on when you fail as a climber? The same thing they focus on as you're under a microscope. When you come back and you don't make it to the top of the mountain, they want to know what went wrong, what did you do, why. They focus on the failure. It's the spin. And you all know what I'm talking about. Jack, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's how you spin it. Yes, you failed, but you spin it in what you've learned. But it has to be truthful spin. How do you control that spin when you try something new and it doesn't work? So we came back and we focused on the positive. I came back personally and I focused on what I knew I needed to do the next time as a team member. And I vowed that that would never happen again. It takes many people working in cooperation for success. The big takeaway for me was that when we help other people succeed, we in turn succeed ourselves. Okay? The second thing I want to just mention briefly is the whole notion of vision. American Family has a vision. You all know what that is. What is your personal vision? What do you want to accomplish personally in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, maybe only in the next 3 years? What is it you want personally for yourself? Because you know what? When you get knocked down, when you have a stressful day, it's not going to be the organization that picks you up and keeps you moving forward. It's going to be your personal vision and what you see yourself accomplishing. That's what's going to pick you up, and that's what's going to lead you forward with your objectives. So what is your personal vision? And make sure that your direct reports understand and have a personal vision themselves within the context of American Family's vision. So, okay, we didn't reach the top of the mountain, but I had an opportunity to go back the following year. First time we climbed from Tibet, the north side of the mountain. Second time from the country of Nepal. 17 hours on an airplane. It's like, well, you know how it is. Yesterday we all sat for a long, long time, and sometimes you can't find that comfortable spot. You've been sitting so long. So when we arrived in Kathmandu, it was like letting tigers out of a cage, and we could hardly wait to get up, to get moving, to get going on our climb. So we ran into the airport, and the first thing we had to do is we had to get our 460 boxes of food and equipment out of customs. So we got off the plane, we ran in, and we saw the customs agent's door, and we just threw it open. Didn't even knock. Well, you know how we are. We Americans, we don't have to knock. We just do what we do. So we barged in, and the customs agent was stunned, and he took a step back, put his hands together, and bowed and said, "Namaste." And of course, that's a typical greeting, so we did the same, "Namaste." And then he looked at us and he said, "Sit." And we looked at him and we said, "No, thank you. We've been sitting for 17 hours. We just want to get our gear." "You must come back at 2:30 this afternoon. Your paperwork is not ready." Okay, that's fine. We had a lot to do in Kathmandu, so out we went. In we came at 2:30. We politely this time knocked on the door, "Namaste, namaste." And then he said, "Sit." And so we sat this time, and then he called for tea. Tea? We don't have time for tea. We really just want to get our gear. "Oh, I'm sorry, your paperwork is still not ready. Come back tomorrow at 8:30. So out we went. In we came. Out we went. In we came. After 7 days, we realized we must be doing something wrong. How many of you get so caught up in your busyness of business that you forget to sit down and drink tea with people? Our customs agent taught us an incredibly important lesson. How do we learn what our customers want? How do we learn what our employees want? It's by sitting down up front and drinking tea. Because you know what? If you don't do it up front, it's going to cost you on the back end. It took us a long time to learn this lesson. After 11 days and a $2,000 gift, we were finally ready to head to the mountain. But I want to point out a couple of things here. In sitting down and drinking tea with people, and please don't be offended by this, but you know, the senior leaders of organizations, sometimes we surround ourselves with people who are like-minded, who think the same way we think. And if I can call them yes people, what we need to do is surround ourselves with people who think differently, who challenge us so that we can understand what reality really is. And if you want to know what's going on in an organization, you don't go to other senior leaders. Who do you go to? You go to the frontline people, because guess what? The frontline people, they're not going to spin it. They're going to give you the reality, and they're going to give you the truth. And please do not be offended by that, but it's something for you to think about. And I own a construction company. I get this. I get this. You want to go to the source of the people you're serving. What is it that they need? How are you serving their needs? Okay? And like I said, it was an incredible lesson that we learned from our customs agent. And then we were ready to head to the base of Mount Everest. We did not fly to the base of Mount Everest. You can do that nowadays, but this was back in 1988, so we had to walk there. We walked 125 miles through blood-sucking, leech-infested forests. Now, I'm from Oregon. We don't have leeches, and I don't know how many of you have leeches in where you live, but they're anywhere between 1/4 of an inch to 2 inches long, and they hang off the leaves alongside the trail, and they have very sticky skin, and they move back and forth like this, if you can see my finger. And they just wait very patiently for some unsuspecting warm-blooded creature to walk by and brush up against them, and then they glom onto you. But they're not content with wherever they land. They like our warm, moist parts, in between our armpits, down on, in between our toes. But they don't hurt us. They just suck our blood, and then they drop off. So I'll get off of that picture. All right. So the second day of the trek, I'm walking along, and we have a very clear view of where we're going to camp that night. It's about 1,000 feet below us. And I could also see my teammates traversing with our porters down this hillside. And I stopped because I was thinking, man, you know, that's really slow when you have to go back and forth and back and forth. And I stopped with this trail that just kind of shot down. And I thought, smugly, I'm going to take that shortcut. Do you all know about shortcuts? Haven't learned that lesson yet. So I'm running down this trail, and I get about, I don't know, not very far in, maybe 50 feet, stop to take my breath. And that's when I made my critical error. I looked down at my legs. I screamed at the top of my lungs, help, help. Of course, I was by myself. There was nobody there to help me, and I'm like freaking out, and I turned around, and I ran back up to the trail, the main trail, and I'm in hysterics. My teammates are in hysterics, a different kind. And I started to pull them off, you know. So you pull a leech, and like a rubber band, it stretches. And then it stretches some more, and then it stretches some more, and then it pops off. But because it's sticky, it's now stuck to your fingers. If I had just calmed down, they would have dropped off and gone somewhere else. Do you have leeches in your lives? These are the people and the things that can suck you dry sometimes without you knowing it. Negative people. I don't know about you, but, you know, and I'm sure you've heard this. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody, and after that conversation you said, man, I got to go take a nap? They've just sucked your energy. So negative people are leeches, and they're all around. They're everywhere in our lives. But it's not the leeches, the negative people that are the issue. It's how we act and react to them. And this is why it is critical that you have a personal vision, a through line of what you want to accomplish and achieve. It's when you have that through line and you are pinpoint focused on that through line that you can navigate the leeches in your lives. What is your through line? What is your vision? And you, of course, got to believe in it. But I also happen to believe the biggest leech in our lives is ourselves. Self-doubt will suck us dry, mental energy, faster than anything else. Do any of you ever doubt yourself? I do, all the time. And this is why it's critical for each and every one of us, especially when you're in a high-powered job, to find your support system. Who is your support system? Your friends, your family, your colleagues. Who supports you? And likewise, who do you support? Okay? After 21 days, we finally arrived at the base of Mount Everest. Before we could actually start the climb, it was very important and we hired 26 Sherpas, by the way. It was very important for us to, well, first of all, we had to set up base camp. And I should mention that base camp is like corporate headquarters. It's a place we could go if a storm moves in on the mountain. We can always come back down to the safety of base camp. It's an incredibly eerie place. It's on a glacier that creaks and moans as it moves downward. Avalanches. Every 15 or 20 minutes, we'd hear an explosion, boom, like a bomb going off, boo, a tumbling down of an avalanche. Avalanches occur so often that after a while you don't even pay attention to them. So we hired 26 Sherpas. Sherpa is an ethnic group within the country of Nepal. They are Buddhist in religion, to help us move our equipment up the mountain. Our Sherpas are all Buddhist in religion. They wanted, the most important thing you can do in their culture is to have a puja, or a blessing ceremony, Buddhist blessing ceremony, before you begin a climb. So we hung 100 meters of prayer flags. We built an altar. We gave offerings to the gods. During the ceremony, our Sherpas chant for about 2.5 hours. And at one point, we were instructed to throw sampa, which is barley flour, into the air, and then to smear it on our face and our hair. White hair means long life. Now, I am not Buddhist in religion, but this was it signified a very important point for our Sherpas and for the Americans who would be climbing shoulder to shoulder on the mountain. First of all, it was an incredible way for our Sherpas to communicate something that was very important to them. Because they invited us to participate, it began to build the bonds of trust and respect that we would need on the mountain. And if you think about all of you getting together in this room, you come together to build the bonds of trust and respect, to look at your future vision of where you want to go, where you want to be. You come together to connect. And another thing is that when we come together as a group, it makes us feel like we belong to something special. And I'm sure that you all feel that very same thing when you get together. If you look around this room, it's a pretty incredible room filled with incredible people. You all are. And you do belong to something special. And that's how we feel when we have the opportunity to come together at base camp around a ceremony like this. Trust, communication, connection, and looking at our ultimate objective. So the first 2,000 feet of climbing is the Khumbu Icefall. It's a glacier. Glaciers flow similar to rivers. At this point here, it drops about 2,000 feet, just like a waterfall would drop. It continues moving down the mountain about 3 to 4 feet a day. When you have a solid moving mass of snow and ice that drops like that, it breaks apart, forming huge ice towers, huge slots in the ground called crevasses. And I'll point this out. See these black dots up there? Those are actually people, so that gives you some idea of the scale here. There's no way around the Khumbu Icefall. We have to go directly through it. We cannot sit down at base camp and look at the ice fall and map out our route. It is an unknown. We have a general direction of where we want to go. It is not a perfect thing. It is an unknown. We are having to make decisions just like all of you with this air of uncertainty that surrounds us. But we have to make decisions and we have to move forward in order to reach our goal. So we have to get into the ice fall. We have to get into the ice fall, and it's almost like making decisions with an open mind, with doubt, if you will. Okay, so we get into the ice fall, we start working in the ice fall, figuring out where our route is going to go. But we have to be able to change in an instant. If it doesn't go this way, then we've got to be able to back up and try something else. And that's really what an organization who is nimble, who is agile, can do, is to make decisions with open minds, with doubt, and then when that doesn't work, we need to be able to change almost instantly. And, well, okay, I'll just leave it at that. So, when I'm talking about fixing the route, setting the route up, we brought about 2 miles of safety line with us. We would hook the rope into the snow and ice, then clip ourselves into it, so if we should slip and fall, that rope is going to catch us. We also brought 8-foot-long aluminum ladders with us. We would link those ladder sections together and then hoist them over the crevasses so that we can then walk safely across them. And by the way, these are OSHA approved. And you wonder why I can't get insurance. So this particular ladder span, and I know Joyce actually cautioned me I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is sometimes how we make decisions. The leader of the expedition is not making all the decisions, okay? The leader doesn't sit down in his big tent at base camp calling out the orders. The people who are working in the ice fall, and by the way, we broke our team into 3 rotations. So it's too dangerous for everybody to be in the ice fall together. So we break our team into smaller groups. The people who are in the ice fall are accountable for where the route goes that particular day. We make the decisions, okay? So putting this ladder across, actually we couldn't flop it over because it was too wide, 5 ladder spans. So my teammates, I'm fairly small. So my teammates, who were much larger than I am, mostly men, all men, they said, well, you know, maybe what we could do is put Stacy on the end of the ladder. We'll all go to the back end, and we'll scooch her across. I'm not that blonde. What we did is we crawled down into the crevasse, climbed out the other side, and then pulled the ladder sections over. So let's digress again. I guess I should get on this side if I'm going to do this. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm backwards. I want you to pretend like we're going to cross this ladder section together. So we set up the ladders, this ladder, and the other benefit of being small is that, guess what? You always get to go first. Okay, so it's my turn. I get to go first. And I'm looking up at the right side of me at a 10-ton ice block. Imagine that it's your competition just waiting for you to get on that ladder so they can shake loose in the ice fall as it moves and just squish you. Okay, so I'm thinking that, oh my God, I hope that doesn't fall. I hope that, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I hope that doesn't fall. I'm not saying this out loud, this is what's going through my head. It's just like, I've got to stop doing that too, all that self-talk. So I'm taking my first steps, and I'm going, and then I tripped, and I caught myself, but my heart is pounding away. I tripped on the ladder rung with my crampons. Okay, so now my heart's pounding away, and I'm thinking, okay, just focus, just focus. Got my balance back. I'm walking, and then I don't know what it is about human nature and why we are drawn to do the things we know we shouldn't do. And my eyes were drawn down 75 feet to the bottom of the crevasse. I'm thinking, okay, just, okay. A few more steps, and guess what? The ladder started to go like this. And now I'm out in the middle of this thing, and I'm bouncing, and I'm thinking, oh, oh. Men don't do that. They go, Anyway. So I'm thinking, sorry. I'm thinking, I don't have to do this. I do not have to do this. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to turn around. I don't have to do this. So I turn around. My teammates were waiting very patiently for me. When I turned around, though, I turned around and I shot them that smile of confidence. Because as leaders, don't you have to fake it sometimes? And I turned back and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't turn around. I can't turn around. It was very clear to me in the middle of that ladder span that they could not do their job until I had done mine. And there was no way that I was going to be letting my teammates down at this point. And quite frankly, I don't know how I made it to the end of that ladder span, but when I did, I collapsed. Been on a lot of mountains throughout the world, and crossing these ladders is incredibly scary. Every time we have a situation, and you all know this, every time you go through a stress or a change or a risk, it's time to ante up, right? If you don't see yourself reaching the top of Mount Everest, you're not going to take the risk of going through this icefall and crossing those ladders. When do you ante up? And each of you has that opportunity every single day. Is it worth it? Do you believe in reaching the top? Do you believe in reaching your objectives? Because if you don't, you may want to think about that and move on. Okay? But the other thing about crossing these ladders is that, you got to know the big picture. All of you have got to know the big picture. But it's not just you in this room. Every single employee in the organization, American Family, needs to know the ultimate vision of where you're headed. They need to know the big picture. But you all know that execution does not take place in the big picture. It's too full of distractions. Too many things going on. You need to focus down after knowing the big picture to the small picture, each ladder rung as it comes in front of you. When you get to the end of the ladder, you can look up again at the big picture. But we all need to know how those small steps fit in to that big picture so that we feel relevant and purposeful in our jobs. And you know what? After a while, you start walking across these ladders. You do a little pirouette, and you just keep going. If it were only so simple. So I put this video in to just kind of make another point, reinforce another point of how important it is for each and every one of us to trust the people we're working with and to treat everyone we work with respect. And I want to be real clear that when we go on these climbing expeditions and within organizations, you're not always going to respect everyone you work with. However, it is critical for the health of the organization that you treat everyone with respect. To know that your teammates are all doing what they're supposed to be doing. We don't have time on a climbing expedition to go through and climb these ladders and make sure every single anchor is in place and placed properly. We trust that our teammates have done that. When we trust that people are doing their job, when we know people are doing their job, it frees us up to do our own jobs. 7 days we were climbing in the icefall, putting up our ropes and our ladders. We were making really great headway. On that 7th day, Don Goodman came back down to base camp, and he said, we've got to move our route. And first of all, it seemed like it was just a kind of I don't even know the word to use. It's just something that just came out. And we didn't pay much attention to it. And then Don said, I really think we need to move our route. And we were about ready to have dinner at this time, and so we decided, well, let's talk about it. Because in our climbing expeditions, decisions are made, if they can be, through consensus, through open discussion. People get to voice, even if it's contrary to what everybody else thinks. It's important that people's voices are heard. So we sat down, we discussed it for about 3 hours. Do we move our route? Do we not move our route? You only have a very short window of opportunity to reach the top of Everest. So moving quickly is it's critical. Anyway, Don, back and forth, and finally Don said, okay, I'll go along with the group decision to leave the route where it is. Didn't feel comfortable about it, but he said, all right, let's just do it. 3 days later, I was having a rest day at base camp. Sipping in my tent, about 6 o'clock in the morning, I was sipping a cup of hot tea, kind of reminiscing again about how well we were moving up this mountain. And somewhere in the back of my head, I'm sure I heard that initial explosion, but it didn't register until it got louder and louder. And then I hopped out of my tent, and all of us at base camp were staring up as this avalanche swept down the west shoulder of Everest. We had 8 people working in the icefall that morning, and there was nothing to be done. And then it was just silent. About 10 minutes later, Don Goodman called down from the icefall, and he said, we are alive. We need help getting down. Don and one of our Sherpas were swept 30 feet into a crevasse. They were pretty beat up. Don broke his finger. Of course, I couldn't help but thinking when they were safely at base camp, that was one way to prove a point. The reason I tell this story is for how Don handled it. What happens within American family if something doesn't go right? I don't know if this happens, but it's human nature sometimes to point a finger. If it's pointed at a person specifically or to the external environment, it's always we want to point, we want to blame, we want to blame, we want to blame. Don didn't do that. We already knew what had happened. Blaming slows us down. When we can move beyond blame, that speeds us up. Blaming causes defensiveness. It doesn't lead to solutions. Don also didn't say, okay, your way didn't work, now we're going to do it my way. We came together as a team and we figured out how we were going to move forward. The next day we went into the icefall. We moved our route to a safer location. And you all know what these are. Okay. Beautiful snow crystals, very small and delicate, and you blow on them with your breath or touch them, they disappear. But it's incredibly, when they stick together, that's when they make a difference. And I would like to say the same with American family. All of you individually by yourselves, you make a difference. But when you stick together as an organization, that's when you can truly make change and make a difference. And you got to ask for help. I think it was Adam who said yesterday about really asking for help. It is okay. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for help, because if you think you're going to make it to the top carrying all this baggage, it's not going to happen. Ask of help it shows your teammates that you value their opinion. And it shows strength within yourself to understand that you don't have all the solutions all the time. We did. We brought 125 pink plastic flamingos to the mountain with us, and they dotted the route all the way to the top. What makes you laugh? Again, what breaks that tension of stress on a daily basis? You couldn't help but smile when you were passing these little guys. Now we're ready to go for the top. We don't all go to the top together. It's, again, too dangerous. We break our team into rotations. The people who were highest on, and who were also healthy would be the first to go. 3 Americans and 3 Sherpas. Our Sherpas worked very well with us. They were competent, and it was only fair that they had that opportunity as well. Now, just very quickly, again, we didn't climb up the mountain and find all those tents set up. 10 days to fix the route through the ice fall. And you all know about systems. So the most time-consuming part of climbing is getting your system, your route, fixed. Once that route is fixed, it would only take like 3 to 4 hours to climb that 2,000 feet to the top of the ice fall. We would go up with a full pack, drop our load, come back down to base camp empty. The next day we would go up with a full pack, drop the load, until we had enough tents, food, fuel, and equipment to live at that elevation. Up and down the mountain, so on and so forth, until we got to 26,000 feet. It's been a team effort up to that point. Above 26,000 feet, we are no longer roped up. Each person is dependent upon their own skills, knowledge, and intent on making it to the top. So the team can only take you so far, and in the end, it's what you're willing to give. I was on that first summit team. And once again, I found myself counting my steps. 1, 2, 49, 50. Pausing, looking up at the moon glistening on the top of Everest, turning around, looking at all the peaks once again, thinking nothing can stop us. Nothing can stop us. And then at one point, I paused and I looked around, and my heart fell to my feet, because 2 of our Sherpas had turned around, and with them they took 2 extra oxygen bottles we would need in order to make it to the top. Well, we didn't talk about it. Well, actually, we said a few 4-letter words. But we didn't talk about it. We continued climbing up like we didn't have a care in the world. We climbed up to 28,000 feet, and we realized we had a problem. We had 1 oxygen bottle, extra oxygen bottle, and 4 people. Jim Fresh, who also happened to be the expedition leader, said, okay, we'll turn around. We'll try again tomorrow. And Steve and I looked at one another. We said, no way. We've got 1 bottle. Someone has to try. And so Jim said, all right, we'll choose. And my heart was thumping away like this because he was looking directly at me, and the only thing I could think to say was, let's draw straws. So we had the world's highest lottery up there. And I know that you all, I know you're very smart people, and I know that you are probably thinking, okay, you have no strategy to deal with this situation? You're going to draw straws? What's that all about? Isn't it true that when you make decisions, we would all like to be able to say, oh, I made this decision and based on analysis of this and that and very well thought out. But what happens if you have to make a decision and your decision, the pros and the cons are of equal value, equal weight? Sometimes it's a crapshoot, right? Okay. Any one of us could have made it to the top. And quite frankly, I did not want to be chosen because I was a woman. I wanted to earn that right to be standing on the top of the mountain. So Pasang, our remaining Sherpa, he held the determining number. Steve chose 8, I chose 4, and Jim chose 6. The winning number was 3. I was closest, and I got that oxygen bottle. I looked up to the peak of Everest, and then I turned around to look at my teammates. All 3 of them had a decision to make. Do they continue up to the top of the mountain, again, regardless of the consequences? Or do they turn around? Steve and Jim decided it was not worth the risk to them. And Pasang decided it was. And I have come to believe that no matter what our goals are in this life, it boils down to what we're willing to risk. And I'm not talking about physical risk. I'm talking about risk in time and energy and resources. I'm talking about risking your reputation for what you believe. I'm talking about the emotional risk. What are you willing to risk to achieve your goals, to achieve your dreams? And you know what? Sometimes we have to walk away from everything that has meant security to us in order to reach those dreams. And it's then that we have to reach deep down inside for what is the truth for us. We said our goodbyes. Pasang and I headed up. This point here, the wind started to gust so hard it blew my hat off my head. Watched it hover and then watched it drop 8,000 feet. Didn't go after it. But I hesitated, and I looked up at the top, and it was almost like a magnet just pulling me towards it. And then at one point I realized I couldn't go any further, and that's when I knew I was standing on top of the world. I felt this incredible swell of emotion rise inside me. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to hug somebody. I wanted to feel our success. I wanted to see it in someone else's eyes. But when I turned around, there was no one there. Sometimes when we meet our goals, our objectives, we're not going to get those external accolades. And that's when we have to know deep within ourselves that we have done it for ourselves, and then we need to figure out the difference that it makes. 15 minutes later, Pasang joined me on top, and his joy was a joy for me to watch. Now you think, whew, you made it to the top, you can kick back and relax. Well, you all know that once you reach an objective, that you can't rest on your laurels, right? Well, we had 35 corporate banners, and we had to photograph those banners. But the top of the mountain is the most vulnerable place to be. We can't survive on the tops of our mountains. We always have to come back down, set new objectives for ourselves. The top, what that is good for, is it's good for looking out at new opportunities for growth and development. And I just want to be real clear here as we end my conversation with you. The world is not changed by people standing on mountaintops. The world is changed by people like you, like me, when we're down here at sea levels. You have an incredible opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the people you serve within the organization as leaders. You have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of your customers. You have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the people who live in your communities and beyond. And I want to wish each and every one of you the very best as you move forward, and take what you've learned from this meeting and give it to the people who need it. Thank you so much for having me this morning.